In the early 2000s, the small town of Holcomb, Kansas, was a quiet place. It was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors. There was little crime. Most people worked hard, went to church, and lived simple lives. Nothing ever happened there that made national news. That is why, when tragedy came, it shocked not just the town, but the entire country. The Clutter family lived on a large farm just outside Holcomb. They were well known and respected. Herbert Clutter was the head of the family. He was a successful farmer and a leader in the community. People saw him as honest, strict, and hardworking. He believed in discipline and strong values. He paid his workers well and treated them fairly. Many people trusted him. Herbert's wife, Bonnie Clutter, was quieter. She struggled with depression and health problems, but she was kind and gentle. She cared deeply for her children. The couple had 4 children, but only 2 lived at home at the time of the crime. Nancy Clutter was 16 years old. She was bright, friendly, and talented. She did well in school and was active in many clubs. She baked pies for neighbors, helped younger kids, and had dreams of going to college. Many people in town admired her. Kenyon Clutter was 15. He was shy and serious, and he liked working with his hands. He enjoyed building things and spent much of his time in the basement workshop. He was close to his father and wanted to become a skilled worker one day. The crime began with a rumor. In a Kansas prison, a man named Floyd Wells was serving time for a different crime. While in prison, he met another inmate named Perry Smith. Floyd told Perry stories to pass the time. One story was about his old employer, Herbert Clutter. Floyd told Perry that Herbert Clutter kept large amounts of cash in a safe at his home. Floyd claimed Clutter never trusted banks and kept tens of thousands of dollars hidden away. This was not true, but Perry believed it. Perry Smith was a troubled man. He had a painful childhood filled with abuse and neglect. His parents were alcoholics. He was often beaten and abandoned. As an adult, Perry drifted from job to job. He had been in and out of prison many times. He believed the world had treated him unfairly. Perry met another criminal named Richard "Dick" Hickok. Dick was different from Perry. He was more confident, more talkative, and more cruel. He liked planning crimes and believed he was smarter than everyone else. After Dick was released from prison, he contacted Perry. The 2 men talked about committing a big crime that would make them rich. The rumor about the Clutter family became their plan. Dick and Perry decided to rob the Clutter home. Dick believed there would be a safe full of cash. Perry did not care as much about the money. He was more focused on the idea of fate. He believed he was meant to do something big, even if it was terrible. They planned carefully. They got weapons, gloves, rope, and a knife. They chose a night when they believed the family would be home and asleep. They convinced themselves that no one would get hurt. But deep down, violence was already part of the plan. On the night of November 14th, 1959, Dick and Perry drove toward Holcomb. The road was dark and quiet. There were no streetlights near the farm. The house stood alone, surrounded by fields. Inside the home, the Clutters were finishing their day. Nancy had baked a pie and helped a friend earlier. Kenyon worked in the basement. Herbert checked on the farm. Bonnie rested in her room. They had no idea 2 men were coming to kill them. Dick and Perry entered the house quietly. They woke Herbert first. They tied him up and demanded money. Herbert told them there was no safe. There was no cash hidden in the house. This made Dick angry. He felt tricked and embarrassed. They tied up Bonnie next. She was weak and frightened. Then they tied up Nancy and Kenyon. One by one, the family was moved into different rooms. At this point, the robbery had failed. There was almost no money in the house. Only a small amount of cash and a pair of binoculars were found. What happened next changed everything. Instead of leaving, Dick and Perry made a decision they could never undo. They murdered all 4 members of the Clutter family. Each person was killed in a brutal way. There was no reason for it. There was no fight. The family was helpless. After the murders, Dick and Perry left the house. They drove away into the night as if nothing had happened. The next morning, November 15th, 1959, two friends of Nancy came to the Clutter house to pick her up for church. They noticed something was wrong. The house was quiet. No one answered the door. When they entered, they found the bodies. News spread fast. Holcomb was filled with fear. People locked their doors for the first time in years. Parents kept children home from school. No one understood why anyone would do this. The police arrived and began the investigation. They had no suspects. There were no witnesses. There was no clear reason for the crime. It felt like evil had come from nowhere. The Clutter murders changed Holcomb forever. People no longer felt safe. The idea that a respected family could be killed for no reason broke the town's sense of peace. Police worked day and night. They interviewed neighbors, workers, friends, and strangers. But weeks passed with no answers. Meanwhile, Dick and Perry traveled across the country. They spent money carelessly. They argued with each other. Perry began having nightmares. Dick stayed cold and focused on escape. The killers were still free, but not for long. After the murders, the town of Holcomb felt frozen in fear. People could not sleep. Farmers carried guns with them. Children stayed close to home. No one understood why the Clutter family had been killed. There was no robbery motive that made sense. The family was kind. They had no enemies. The crime felt random and cruel. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation, also known as the KBI, joined the local police. This was one of the largest investigations in Kansas history at the time. Dozens of officers worked long hours. They searched the Clutter home again and again, hoping they had missed something. The house showed signs of planning. The killers had brought their own rope and weapons. This meant it was not a crime of anger or passion. It was planned. But planned by who and why? At first, police believed the killer might be someone local. They questioned farm workers, neighbors, and anyone who had recently visited the Clutter home. Herbert Clutter was known to be strict but fair. Still, police checked for anyone who might hold a grudge. They found nothing. No fingerprints led anywhere useful. No witnesses had seen strange cars. No one heard screams in the night. The Clutter farm was too far from town. The killers had used the darkness to their advantage. Police followed rumors. Some people said they saw strange men weeks before. Others claimed they heard arguments. None of it could be proven. Every lead ended in disappointment. As days turned into weeks, pressure grew. The media started paying attention. Newspapers across the country wrote about the murders. People wanted answers. The police had none. The break in the case came from an unexpected place: a prison. Months after the murders, Floyd Wells, the same man who had spread the rumor about Herbert Clutter, began to feel afraid. He heard about the murders and realized what his words had caused. The guilt became too heavy. Floyd went to the prison warden and asked to speak with investigators. When police arrived, Floyd told them everything. He explained how he once worked for Herbert Clutter. He admitted that he lied about the safe full of cash. He said he told the story to Perry Smith while they were both in prison. This information changed everything. For the first time, police had names. Investigators looked into Perry Smith and Richard Dick Hickok. Dick Hickok had a history of crime. He was known as manipulative and selfish. He believed rules did not apply to him. He often blamed others for his problems. He liked control. Perry Smith was different. He was quiet and sensitive, but deeply broken. His childhood was filled with abuse, neglect, and pain. He believed his life had no real purpose. He often talked about fate and destiny. He also had violent thoughts, even if he tried to hide them. The two men together were dangerous. Dick planned. Perry carried out violence. Police learned that after Dick was released from prison, he contacted Perry. The timing matched the murders. They also learned the two men suddenly had money and were traveling across the country. The KBI began tracking them. Police found evidence that Dick and Perry had left Kansas shortly after the murders. They went to Mexico, then returned to the United States. They traveled through several states, working small jobs and spending money. They were careless. Dick wrote checks using stolen information. Perry talked too much to strangers. Slowly, police followed their path. Investigators collected witness statements from gas stations, hotels, and workplaces. They matched timelines. Piece by piece, the story came together. Finally, police located Dick and Perry in Las Vegas, Nevada. In December 1959, police arrested Dick Hickok and Perry Smith in Las Vegas. The arrest was quiet. There was no dramatic chase. The men were taken into custody without a fight. At first, both denied everything. They were returned to Kansas and placed in separate jail cells. Police knew the two men depended on each other. Separating them was part of the strategy. Investigators began long interviews. They asked the same questions again and again. They waited. They watched. Perry struggled the most. He had nightmares. He felt guilt. He talked about his past. He cried. Dick stayed calm and defensive. He blamed Perry. He blamed bad luck. He blamed everyone but himself. Eventually, Perry broke. He confessed to killing the Clutter family. He said the murders were not planned the way people thought. He claimed Dick wanted to leave witnesses alive at first. But when the robbery failed, everything changed. Perry admitted he killed Herbert Clutter. He also admitted killing the children. He said he felt a strange calm during the murders, followed by deep regret. Later, Dick confessed too, but only after Perry did. Dick tried to place more blame on Perry. He said Perry was unstable, but the evidence showed they were both responsible. The confessions matched the crime scene details perfectly. Only the killers could have known certain facts. The case was officially solved. When news of the arrest spread, Holcomb felt relief, but not peace. People were glad the killers were caught, but the fear did not disappear. The idea that two strangers could enter a home and kill an entire family for nothing stayed with them. The Clutter house was empty. Some people refused to drive past it. Others left flowers. The town mourned quietly. Dick and Perry were charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. They would face trial. The time before the trial was long. Lawyers prepared their cases. Psychologists examined Perry. Some experts said he had mental health problems. Others said he knew exactly what he was doing. Dick showed no remorse. He joked with guards. He talked about appeal strategies. Perry, on the other hand, seemed haunted. He read the Bible. He talked about dreams where the Clutters spoke to him. The question everyone asked was simple. Were they evil or were they broken? The court would decide their fate. The trial of Dick Hickok and Perry Smith began in March 1960. By then, the Clutter murders were known across the United States. Reporters filled the courtroom. People from Holcomb attended every day. They wanted to see the men who destroyed a good family and changed their town forever. Both men were charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. This meant the death penalty was possible. The case was not about whether the Clutters were killed. That was clear. The main question was whether Dick and Perry were fully responsible for their actions. Dick and Perry sat at separate tables with their lawyers. They looked very different. Dick Hickok appeared confident. He often smiled. He whispered to his lawyer. He seemed calm, as if the trial was just another game. Many people in the courtroom found his behavior disturbing. Perry Smith looked smaller and quieter. He often stared at the floor. Sometimes he looked sick or tired. When photos of the crime scene were shown, Perry looked away. Dick did not. The prosecutors told the story step by step. They explained the false rumor about the safe. They described how Dick planned the robbery. They showed how both men brought weapons and rope. They explained that the murders were not accidents. They were choices. The jury listened in silence. Dick and Perry were sent to death row. They would remain there for almost 5 years. During this time, they lived very different lives. Dick continued to deny responsibility. He wrote letters complaining about prison life. He talked about appeals and technical details. He never showed real regret for the Clutter family. Perry changed. He spent long hours reading and writing. He painted pictures. He talked openly with prison guards about his guilt. He said he felt sorry for what he had done. He admitted he deserved punishment. Some guards felt sympathy for Perry. They saw him as broken, not cruel. But sympathy did not erase the crime. Many appeals were filed. Lawyers argued about mental illness and legal mistakes. Each appeal delayed the execution. Each appeal was denied. For the Clutter family's relatives in the town of Holcomb, the waiting was painful. They wanted closure, but closure was slow. On April 14, 1965, the final date arrived. Dick Hickok was executed first. He showed little emotion. His final words were short. He claimed he was being treated unfairly. He did not apologize to the Clutter family. Perry Smith was executed next. Before his death, Perry apologized. He said he never meant to kill anyone. He said he felt sorry for the pain he caused. Some people believed him. Others felt it was too late. At midnight, both men were dead. The case was officially closed. Holcomb never returned to the way it was before. People still remembered the Clutters as a kind, hard-working family. The farm eventually changed ownership. The house no longer stood as it once did, but the memory remained. Parents became more careful. Doors stayed locked. Trust was no longer automatic. The murders taught the town a hard lesson. Evil does not always come from someone you know. Sometimes it comes from strangers, driven by lies and anger. The Clutter murders are remembered for many reasons. They showed how a simple lie can lead to terrible violence. A single false rumor about money destroyed 4 lives, and 2 more in the end. They showed how different kinds of criminals can work together. Dick was cold and selfish. Perry was emotional and broken. Together, they were deadly. The case also raised questions that still matter today. Can childhood abuse create violent adults? Is mental illness an excuse or an explanation? Does execution bring justice or just an ending? There are no easy answers. The Clutter family is remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived. They were honest people who trusted the world around them. Dick Hickok and Perry Smith are remembered as a warning. Their story shows how greed, lies, and untreated pain can grow into something unstoppable. This case reminds us that true crime is not entertainment. It is real life, real families, real loss. And once violence begins, it never truly ends. It only leaves echoes.